Well, I'd like to welcome Bruce Keir. We've had numerous attempts to get him here, which has been thwarted by certainly COVID, a weather event, and New South Wales being totally locked down for some time. But we're very thrilled to have him here today. He turns 88 in a few days' time. We've got him 88. Now, I've known Bruce Keir for a long time, having attended the Bribey Island Classic Boat Regatta and also the Tweed Regatta that he co-organised with Bob Mobystack and a couple of others, and very humble man indeed. But I was reading this book one morning at 6 o'clock, which was loaned to me by people we'd provided shore access to who are staying on their yacht out the front of our place. Adventures of Chaz from Taz, Renegades at Sea. Who's read the book? There you go. What a legend, what a legend. Right? And for those of you who don't read my emails, I know that's most of you, I can tell you. An extract from the Charles Blundell book, Adventures of Chaz from Taz, Volume 1, Renegades at Sea, describes the building of the Doug Peterson one-tonner known as Pioneer Sound or B195 or Magic Pudding, which was at the cutting-edge design of transition from heavyweight space and keel boats to lightweight boats today. This is what I read. It was decided that dedicated and talented boat builder, Bruce Keir, would be asked to construct the yacht. An outstanding dinghy sailor, Bruce surrounded himself with a team of guys with a similar sailing experience and who also shared his enthusiasm for wonderful workmanship. His boat yard specialised in constructing Flying Dutchman and Fireball dinghies, and the centre of operations were at Seaford, a southern bayside town near Melbourne. Well, I read that at 6 o'clock and I wanted to ring him straight away. Now, if you ever rung Bruce, he really does need his hearing aids. I don't think he sleeps with them in. So I had to wait till about 9 or 10 o'clock to tell him I'd read all about him. Anyway, so I'm going to get Bruce to tell us about how he started his boating life. Fire away, Bruce.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me, and I hope I don't bore you, but I was born in Melbourne, in suburban Melbourne in 1934, and I was born with a couple of passions, one of which I knew almost immediately, and the second one came later. And this first passion that I had, and I still have to this very day, is a passion for working with timber. I have done nothing in my life except work with timber, and had a lot of fun. I was only made aware relatively recently that there is something of a boat building history in my family, something of which I did not know. But the oldest still operating steam launch, Murray River steam launch in Australia, the Enterprise, is on Lake Burley Griffin, and it goes out daily evidently. And it was built by a Robert Keir in the 1850s. Now, Robert Keir, when I work it all out, was probably my great-great-grandfather. And I do know that my grandfather was a Murray River paddle steamer skipper. So there was a little bit of boating background in my background. And the other passion that I didn't mention, which I wasn't aware of at the time, was a passion that developed later on, and a passion for boats. And it's a fact that at my age now, it's the first time since I was about 10 or 12 years old that I haven't owned a boat. So boats have been very, very much my life. I'll talk initially, I realise of course that I'm a Victorian. Most of my thoughts are about things that happened in Victoria, and I became a very serious yacht racing competitor as well, and initially in Victoria. Now, in the early days, and particularly in the days before the Second World War, it was fairly commonly felt that boats had to be heavy and deep in the water to go to windward. And as a result, the downwind legs of a yacht race was just an excuse to get back to the leeward mark so that you could start beating to windward again. The very famous boat builder, sailor, designer in England, Arthur Fox, in the 1930s, started to realise that if boats were lightweight, they might go faster downwind. And if they'll go faster downwind, then it might be easier to win yacht races. And he experimented a lot in the International 14 class, building super lightweight boats. But because there was no such thing as waterproof plywood, they still had to be conventionally built with bent, steam bent timbers, but of tiny section and very thin planking and copper fastening. Then along came the Second World War, and one of the real positives out of the Second World War was the development of waterproof glue and waterproof plywood, and they were developed to build fighter planes. So after the war was over in the early 1940s, people could buy waterproof glue and waterproof plywood to build lightweight boats, which were slowly starting to appear. And my very, very first boat was an interesting little boat. It was a 6'6" dinghy designed by the great Charlie Cunningham, who, for you non-yachties, probably don't know who I'm talking about, but Charlie became famous in later years, initially designing the Gwen 12, but then got very much involved in racing catamarans. And my father, who was a very, very skilled craftsman, was invited to come and have a look at a little weeny dinghy that Charlie Cunningham built. And we were warned that when we come to take some full-size pages of the Age newspaper with us. And so and I can remember this day vividly, just as a little boy. So we were able to lay these big sheets of paper on the bottom of this little dinghy and make 3 paper patterns of the panels of the boat. One of the bottom, which also twisted up, and the chine met the shear line not a couple of feet, but a distance from the bow. Another pattern for the transom, and another pattern for the top side. Now those 3 pieces of plywood, well, double the numbers because obviously the boat's got 2 sides. Those pieces of plywood cut to shape could then be pulled together and joined on the corners, and this, I think, was the forerunner of what we take for granted now, and we call it stitch and glue. The big disadvantage, of course, of then was that there was no such thing as fiberglass tape to hold them together. So a chine and a hog or keel had to then be fitted in after around these panels that are just pushed together to form the shape. And I think that was probably the the original, what we call cone bow that happened in dinghies. Charlie then went on to, so the point was, this was on a Sunday night we picked this up. We had a holiday shack down at Rosebud, which is a holiday beach on Port Phillip. Dad went back to work on the Sunday night, and then when he came to join up with us again on the next weekend, he had this finished little boat with him, which was pretty remarkable. We then, Charlie had designed the first Gwen 12 by this stage, and so a friend convinced my father that he ought to buy one of these hulls from Charlie and finish off into a boat, a sailing boat, for his sons. I have two brothers. And that's in fact what we do. So it was probably the third Gwen 12 that was ever built. And the Gwen 12, as you're probably aware, developed into a very, very keen, seriously raced dinghy. Okay, that's about as far as we want to go on that subject, John, I think.
You also had a little 18-foot clinker down there with a clay twin in it, I believe.
Say that again?
You had an 18-foot clinker with a clay twin engine that used to go fishing in.
Dad had a fishing boat. Yeah. Dad had a little fishing boat, a little clinker 18-footer that he bought as a bit of a wreck. And although Dad wasn't a boating man, he was a very very, very clever, skilled craftsman, and that was turned into a nice little fishing boat with a clay twin-cylinder engine in it. So my initial introduction to boats was in the fishing boat called Biddy, and this tiny little dinghy that didn't have a name, but I used to just row it up and down. It had oars, of course, and I used to row it up and down the beach. Yeah.
Okay, and in 1953, you joined the Black Rock Yacht Club and were a foundation member of the Rosebud Yacht Club.
Yeah.
In 1954, you joined Port Melbourne, the Port Melbourne Yacht Club, and Bob Galton and yourself decided to build a Mark II Moth each. Mike Fletcher, Moth Australian champion at the time, gave you advice. Is that the
case? Yes, yeah. We, Bob and I had, we were in our very early 20s or late teens, and Bob, a very close friend, and he's still a close friend to this day, said, why don't we build a couple of moths for ourselves? And I said, well, look, I know John Fletcher's brother. Why don't we ask him if he'll give us some advice? So we went down to see Mike, and he just told him everything we needed to know about building a Mark II Moth, with some modifications that he'd done for himself and very, very successfully raced. Now the Moth class was very much a development class and still is, and I just wonder how much the rules have changed now, but then there was only 3 rules in the Moth class. One is it had to be had a maximum length of 11 feet, a maximum height of 20 feet 6 above the deck, and 80 square feet of sail. Now they were the only rules on building a moth. So we built those moths, and then decided we better find a yacht club to sail in. And because the then champion, Victorian champion in the moths, and a guy that had won numerous Australian championships, was Brian Morris, the son of the developer of the Moth class. He was sailing at Port Melbourne, at the Port Melbourne Yacht Club. And so we decided to join Port, and we did, the two of us, with our two little, have we seen them? Oh yeah, there's one of them there, that's mine. Yeah, that was that first one that I built, which was called Skokium. Bob's was virtually the same, was called Geronimo, that's by the way. So that's why we joined Port Melbourne.
And Bruce, tell us about that radical mast.
The righto.
Did you have it up and you ran under a building or something? What happened?
Did I know? We, as I mentioned, that Moth was a development class, and one of the sailmakers in Melbourne who was very interested in experimenting with radical ideas and just heard a bit about bent masts, and he convinced me to build that curved mast, which was one of the really early bent mast. It wasn't very flexible, but it was just an experimental thing. It was particularly good in very light weather, but not very good at all in hard breezes. But it was just an experiment that we played with. Oh, and in actual fact, I did the first big race I ever won is when I actually won one of the heats of the Victorian Moth Champ in super light weather using that mast, beating the famous Mike Fletcher and the famous Brian Morris just in this one race. So that was a bit of a starting point to realise that maybe if I do things right, I might become a reasonably competitive sailor.
Now Bruce, I've got here Brian Morris, the Victorian Moth Champion, sailed at the Williamstown Victorian Yachting Council Regatta, and Brian offered to swap boats with you. Your boat wasn't that competitive, but you swapped boats and you won.
That's right, and that astounded me, and even when I think of it today, I can remember that vividly. I mean, it was only 70 odd years ago, but I just remember the race vividly, that Brian's very famous boat was called Mark II, and we're referring to them as Mark II types, but his boat was actually Mark II, which had dominated moth sailing for years. And he'd taken an interest in me. He could see I was very keen, and we were just rigging up on the beach at Port to sail across to Williamstown on the Sunday for the race. And he said, "What say we swap boats?" And I nearly fell over with fright. But I said, "Yeah, thank you." And we did, and I won the race comfortably, and he sailing my race was in the middle of the fleet. So that was another thing that just gave me a real shot in the arm, that if I could learn how to set boats up, there was nothing wrong with my boat, but I didn't know how to set it up properly and get just natural boat speed out of it. So it's funny that there are these little things that sometimes can make a change that even affects your whole life.
Now, we had a similar situation in the Paynesville Regatta where Mike Fletcher swapped boats with you, and again you won, Bruce.
Oh, again, yeah, just for fun. We used to go down to Paynesville every Easter for not a very serious weekend of sailing, but a fair amount of social activities and a lot of sailing, because we all love sailing. And Mike had designed himself a skiff moth, and it wasn't super good, but it was fairly good. He'd come second in the Australian Championship with it, and he and I swapped. He very kindly offered to swap. He sailed my boat, I sailed his skiff moth, and I won that race. And
now, Brucey, this was one of my first slides. This was a book at your home, the Australian New Zealand Complete Book of Boating. And if we go to the next slide, Dinghy Hulls by Bruce Keir. And if you can read that, it says, for a racing dinghy hull to reach maximum speed, its designer intended, the builder has to achieve two basic goals. The hull must be fair and it must be as light as possible within the class rules. But Bruce goes on to say that you don't build the boat and then make it light. Every sheet of plywood, every veneer of plywood is hand selected and blah, blah, blah. So it's over from the very beginning. And that's Bruce. I don't know what era that was, Bruce, but that's a while ago.
Yeah, that's a fair while. That'd be, oh, blown if I know. But
yeah, a long time ago, Bruce. Yeah. Now, can you tell us about this groovy little vehicle you had? I hope they didn't have traffic lights in those days, because I reckon if you had to stop at a red light, you'd have had girls jumping in the windows, as you know, at every set.
I actually, what I didn't mention was that I served my apprenticeship as a joiner. I'm not a boat builder by trade, but even while I was, and I worked for the company N&N, we were shop fitters, and my first vehicle was that I bought from N&N when they were ready to throw it out. So that became my first vice car. But even while I was serving my apprenticeship in the joinery trade, I was, at that stage, I was pretty keen on boats, and I was building boats in the spare time, and I used to build myself a new moth every year, experimenting with various shapes and sizes and God knows what within the moth class rules. Okay, now
in the 1956 Olympics, Bruce was in a squad for Olympic selection in the fin class.
Yeah, in the build-up to the 1956 games, so it'd be 1955, I suppose. Now, I'd just done my national service. I mean, it wasn't all that long after the big war, and I'd done my NASHO in the army, and clubs around the bay on Port Phillip were invited to nominate three of their club members into a scheme that was put together, the ultimate of which was to find our fin rep for the 56 games. So I was one of, I don't know how many, maybe 40 to 45 fairly promising sailors, some of them very, very good. And we worked out for 6 months with the professor of physical jerks at the Melbourne Uni, who got us incredibly fit, and then we got into fin boats and sailed them in a series of trials. I was very, very quickly eliminated because I was miles too small to be a fin sailor. You had to be a monster to be a fin sailor, you know, even in those days I'm sort of 6'2" and 14 stone heavy, but the experience was great. And the fin, as I was actually, Tommy Stevens and I was just talking about it just later, what a beautiful boat they are to sail just through the water. The fin is a magnificent craft. So that's what that was all about, John.
Wonderful. Okay, we've got another moth here before we move on to...
well, that's one that moth is... after a while, most of my boats were called tramp, and that's the original tramp.
It's here, Bruce.
Oh, that's there.
Yeah.
And it's a skiff with a cone bow, and an experimental boat, good in flat water, not good in big seas, and our Victorian Championships that year were jointly on the Albert Park Lake, which is for those of you who don't know much of Melbourne, is a lake that's almost in the middle of Melbourne, and the second weekend of the racing was down at Warneet, which is an offset of the Western Port Bay, so it's flat water sailing, and I won the Victorian Championship in that boat.
Fantastic. Now, okay, we're just moving on to Gwen 12s. Now, Mike Fletcher, who we previously mentioned in relation to the moths, invites Bruce to sail with him in Storm 2, his Gwen 12. and they became an unbeatable combination. Now, just to explain who Mike Fletcher is, Mike was, at the original time we were intending to have Bruce speak, we had not only Tommy Stevenson, but Mike Fletcher was coming as well. I can't think whether it was the lockdown of New South Wales or whatever, but I'm rather glad he didn't, because he had some sort of a heart turn and ended up being rushed to hospital. So we're glad that didn't happen on our watch, but it would have been marvellous to have the three of them there. But Mike was a 9-time Australian sailing team coach and the Australia 2 America's Cup crew coach as well. Very talented man.
Yeah, okay. Can I say a little bit, Mike, about Mike at this stage?
Absolutely.
Mike is an incredible sailor, one of Australia's very best, and he was a man very clever with his hands. Originally he was a pattern maker by trade, and then he got involved in the sailmaking industry for many years. He ran Elstrom Sails for many years, and found that even when he made sails for big boats, he needed to help the owners set them up on these boats, and he suddenly woke up to the fact that he could have a future coaching. And in actual fact, he's been a full-time professional, world-renowned coach for 40 plus years, having been our coach in 9 Olympics and the coach for when they won the America's Cup. So he we're about the same age, and he was having a move into the Gwen 12 class that by this stage was a very strong racing class, and he asked me, and they're a two-man boat of course, and he asked me to crew with him, and we sailed together for quite a few years and won nearly every race we ever sailed in, and lots of big championships. But more important than anything else, a wonderful friendship developed that the friendship is alive today, that it was probably even more alive today than it was then in those days.
So that photograph is Storm 2?
That's Storm 2, yeah.
Cruising along.
Now,
That's you on the wire, Bruce? Is that you on the wire?
Yeah, that's me on the wire, but it was radical in many respects, because the trapezes were relatively new there, and the Gwen 12 class was one that was just starting to experiment with them or use them, and the forward hands were using them constantly. But Mike also used to wear a harness himself, so that if I'd come in to set up the kite to put it in the bag or something, Mike would hook himself onto the trapeze and sail the boat from the trapeze, which was something absolutely unknown of in those days. I mean, it happens commonly now, but it's these things that often change the way things go. I made all the spars for the boat, and Mike built the boat, yeah.
We've got a couple of shots of one being framed up here, Bruce.
Oh yeah, that's a Gwen 12, and you can see that disappearing chine I'm talking about, the way that the chine, in the case of the Gwen, hits the shear line a couple of feet from the bow, and so the bottom panel is the one big panel that is then twisted down, and as it's twisted down it just naturally forms a cone shape, and so that style of boat is what we now call, that style of bow is what we call cone bows, and they're used in quite a lot of different classes now. But that was the early days of it.
Good on you, Bruce. Now, I apologise, we've got two. The system we're using is one that was flood affected. The brand new one we bought doesn't work, can you believe, our microphone? So we have two microphones for this interview style situation, but it's not served us well today. So that's again, no, that's a Dutchman.
Oh, I can look there. I don't have to look there, do I?
That's a Dutchman. Okay, but
No, that's not a
Dutchman.
Dutchman. That's still a Gwen.
Still a Gwen,
They're
yeah.
Gwens,
Here we are, Gwen.
that's a Gwen, yeah.
There she is finished?
That's a finished Gwen, yeah.
And
No, that's a jolly boat.
okay, now that is a jolly boat. That's what we want.
Okay, well, so will I talk about the jolly boats?
I think you jolly well should.
Yeah, right, okay. When I joined Port Melbourne Yacht Club, it was, and Port Melbourne Yacht Club is one of the oldest clubs in Australia. It was formed in 1889, and it has been predominantly a big boat club since those early days. Just before the war, they were sailing dinghies a fair bit, and particularly a class called the Sandridge Sharpie. But with the war and things not doing too well after the war, the club was at a sort of an all-time low in the racing world. In fact, there was only about a half a dozen boats that sailed every weekend, a few moths, and a few development boats called Port Phillip 12s, which were trying to be developed to replace the Sandridge Sharpie, and that wasn't happening. And so we thought it might be a good idea if we could somehow come up with a three-man boat, not too super high performance, but to encourage a lot of members in the club, because for every if we can get some three-man boats, for every new boat, it's 3 new members. And we looked at a lot of different boats like lightweight Sharpies, Elwood Seahorses, and they all just didn't seem right. But it appeared that the Upper Fox design jolly boat could be a really good one. Now it's 18 feet long, round bilge, and was sailed in England with a crew of 2, with a soft sail meaning not full-length sail battens in the sails, and an overlapping headsail. But when we approached the Ferry Marine Company that built the jolly boats in England, they wouldn't give us the plans for it. They must have had some deal with Upper Fox, well, who knows what the deal was. But what they did do, which was remarkable, was that they sent us out a complete boat, a boat completely rigged. So they gave us this boat for nothing, but they wouldn't give us plans. So so the boat looked pretty good. So I measured it up accurately and built a boat. This was before I was professionally building, and built a mould, and we built 2 of them. One for me and one for my friend Bob Galt, who we mentioned a while ago. Bob was my best mate and we did everything together, so we built a jolly boat each. Now this was the same time, historically, that the Flying Dutchman had been notified to be the next 2-man boat for the Olympics. So they were being developed in Australia, the FDs, and in fact the guys in Victoria that were interested in FDs, they got together and they built a mould that they could build FDs on and develop the FDs. So we built these 2 boats and raced them, actually even against the FDs, and strangely enough, it's laughable to say now when we see how well the Flying Dutchman have developed, but we would occasionally beat them in very hard breezes. So the jolly boat potentially was pretty good. So with this experience, we decided, yeah, the jolly boat would be a good thing. And we did something which transpired to be, in many ways, one of the most exciting things that's happened to me in my life. We set up you'd call a cooperative, I suppose, within our club, and we somehow convinced lots and lots of people that they ought to get themselves a jolly boat. And over one winter, we actually built 31 jolly boats, 26 of them complete. We built an extra 5 thinking, well, maybe we would be able to sell the shells to other clubs or something. So at the end of that winter, we lined up 26 boats on the beach, completely finished, painted, sails on them, even a beach trailer, and that was pretty remarkable. A lot of people couldn't believe it happened, and when I talk about it now, a lot of people just seriously wonder whether I'm telling the truth or not. But I'm sure I was telling the truth. So we did that at port, and it solved our problem. Suddenly, with 26 new boats, if my arithmetic's correct, that's something like 80 new members in the club. And the club started its process of booming thanks to the jolly boats.
Good on you, Bruce. That's an extraordinary feat. They launched 26 boats on one day from one winter. Extraordinary. Now, more with the cooperative program, 2 years later, Bruce, you built 24 moths, once again for the same club?
Oh, yeah, for the same reason. Then we got a bit cocky, I think, and we reckon that was all pretty easy. And we had another session where we built a mould and we built 24 moths for club members. When I say we, it was all the club members, and it was my job just to organise it always. We had a very, very dynamic Commodore who'd come up with these ideas, and then with Bob and I, Bob my mate, who was the rear Commodore and I was the vice Commodore, we were the guys that could organise and do all the work and get it done, and so in a matter of about 3 years the club had built, what's 26, so that's 41, is it? What, 26 and 24, what's that?
That's 450.
Yeah.
Plus you had another 5.
However many and I have to this day, I have a deep love of the Port Melbourne Yacht Club. That's where my sailing roots are, and I'm obviously still a member, yeah.
Okay, now to this point, you've got to understand that Bruce is not a professional boat builder. It's just simply his passion for working with wood and his passion with boats and his clear ability to understand sailing and wanting to improve designs and refine things. So from here, Bruce launches his career as a dinghy builder, correct?
Yeah, okay. At the end of my jolly boat sailing, I'd done quite well in them racing-wise, and the FDs had been, here's an FD. The FDs had been introduced to being the next Olympic class, so I decided that I'd like to get in sailing FDs with the hope of maybe one day being an Olympic rep. So I borrowed the mould from the Victorian Flying Dutchman Association, and another good friend, Icky Owen, who's not with us anymore now, but we built a couple of FDs, one for him and one for me, and it's got to be understood that small boat building wasn't a big thing in Victoria. Victoria had a lot of very good boat builders, but they were predominantly builders of big boats, and with this introduction of super lightweight plywood and that, a lot of them wouldn't build plywood dinghies because they genuinely felt that they wouldn't be strong enough. So most dinghies were built by guys just building it for themselves. There were, I can't think of it. There must have been some good boat builders around. Yeah, there was Harold Lang down at Sorrento. It was pretty rare to get a boat builder that was prepared to build them. So I decided that I'd have a serious go at professionally building boats. And so with tongue in cheek, I let it be known that I was going to start building boats professionally, and I just got run off my feet. People had noticed my own amateur build boats, and I think a lot of people had seen what had happened at Port Melbourne and probably was aware of the fact that I had a lot to do with it, that I was just absolutely flush with orders of small boats. Initially Cherubs and Flying Dutchman, and then generally lots of other boats that we'll get round to talking about. Yeah.
Well, we can talk about the Ben Lexon Monarch. You built the
prototype. Oh yeah, there's the famous Ben Lexon, or as we knew in those days, Bob Miller his name was. Ben had designed the Contender, a single-handed boat, hopefully for for future use in the Olympics. About, I don't know how long a Contender was, probably about 14 feet long, a beaut boat, but it never got Olympic selection, but it became very popular, and it's still popular. And I was approached by one of my clients to design a new 18-foot super fast boat. And I wasn't the least bit interested. I said, there's too many classes now anyway, we don't want another one. But Bobby Miller was a good mate of mine. I was racing against him at this stage, racing against him regularly in the Flying Dutchman. And so I approached Bob and said, look, this guy wants an 18-foot fast boat. Do you want to have a go? And Bob said, yeah. And so he designed a beaut 18-foot fast boat, and it got called a Monarch. I'm not quite sure where the name came from, and I built the first three, and not many more. It never caught on, which is often the case that good boats aren't popular for a lot of reasons. So that's the story behind the Monarch.
Righto,
there's another thing, John, that you and I haven't discussed at all. I think would be appropriate to bring it in now. See, at this stage I was just working on my own in the carport at home, at my parents' place. I was still living at home with my parents, and I was getting busier and busier and busier. And I had a guy come and finish his apprenticeship with me, but not officially. He was the apprentice for a boat builder called Graham Cometto, who got mysteriously lost at sea in a boat that he'd built, and one of these weird things that, he went on a trip and never reappeared. And so he came and asked me if he could finish his time with me, and I agreed. And then I got busy and busier, and I moved out from home and rented a factory in Richmond, which is an inner suburb in Melbourne. Richmond's the home of the mighty Tigers, I might say. And then tried to employ somebody to build boats with me. And because of my background in joinery, I sort of looked at joiners because I knew the way they thought. And 2 or 3 guys agreed to come and work with me. And in each case, they were really good tradesmen and really nice guys, but I think in each case, they only lasted a day because they honestly could say to me at the end of the day, look, it's terrific work here, but we just don't know what we're doing. You know, they didn't know anything about boats. So I approached the apprenticeship because boat building was a compulsory trade. Legally, you weren't allowed to employ a young person unless you apprenticed them. And legally, it would be illegal if you had a young guy there that was just employed to sweep the floors. Legally, if he picked up a tool and used it, he was breaking the law. So I approached the Apprenticeship Commission and explained the situation, how I would really like to have apprentices. And they said, right, oh, we'll come and we'll check you out. And they came out and had a good look and saw what we were doing, and they said, you'll do us. You guys are really knowing what you're doing. You're doing good quality work. And so I was then officially allowed to have apprentices. And I smile a fair bit to myself now that I think I've trained 7 or 8 qualified boat builders, and yet I'm not one myself. So, but the test was you either could do the work or you couldn't.
I must say that Bruce, when I met him, apologised, saying, look, I'm not a formally trained boat builder, but if you've seen his work, well, I mean, it just speaks for itself. But just like to talk about surf boats. I'll run through this pretty quickly because we need to keep moving along, Bruce. Yeah. But so Bruce repaired a number of surf boats. Surf boats were not made in Victoria. Repaired a number of surf boats, and then he was approached to build a surf boat. And Bruce can tell us all about it, eh?
Yep. Okay. Yeah, we the surf boat guys are pretty good at smashing their boats up. They're not used for saving lines anymore. They're purely a racing boat. And the surf boats had never been built in Victoria, and we did all the repairs on them. You know, they were a really good. They fit a really good role in our work program. At a certain time of the year, they were pretty good at smashing their boats, and it just fitted in nicely. So the Victorian Surf Lifing Association approached me and asked me if I was prepared to build them. And I said, yeah, I'd love to. They looked to me as though they'd be beaut to build. But when I asked them for the design, they said, oh, that's the job of the builder. He's got to design it. Well, I knew absolutely nothing about surf boats, so I went and... Somebody's waving. What's he waving?
Is that okay? Yeah. Oh, you're right. Just let that one go. Thank you.
Yeah. Keep going. No, we have the lights off. Lights off.
So
lights off are good. You have the lights on.
No, it'll be okay.
Okay.
So I had designed the boat. So I went and watched a few surf carnivals to get a bit of an idea of what they did, and then whenever a boat would come in for repairs, it would always be brought in by their boat captain. Then I would ask them, what sort of conditions is this boat good in? I knew it was a mistake to ask them to make a comment about the actual shape of the boat because none of them would have a clue. But they could tell me that this boat's very good at going out through the seas and this boat's good at catching the waves and blah, blah, blah. So I did design one, and which was a bit of a compromise shape, and I did something almost by accident, but worked extremely well, and I made the mould for the boat a bit flexible. so I could adjust the rocker of the boat. And when I say the rocker, that's the amount, if you look at the boat sideways, the amount of spring in the keel. I could make the boat a lot flatter or a lot more sling. Because again, with surf boats, there's a series of measurement rules they've got to be built to. And I won't go into the rules now, but that didn't contravene with any of those rules. So, if the next championships was going to be held in a place that had a very, very small surf, then I could build a flat boat. And if it was in a very, very big surf, then you built a boat with a lot of rocker in it. And every year, on the Yarra River at Moomba, the big celebration at Moomba, they had a race on the river for surf boats. So we could build an almost dead flat surf boat, which, if properly rowed, would obviously win the race. And the first prize was a new boat. So in effect, we'd get 2 orders out of it. We'd build a club boat that we knew would win another boat. So that was a beaut thing about myself. I loved building them. I'm not a surfer myself. I don't know anything about the surface. But in those days, of course, they were all timber and had another. I don't want to go into too much detail, but had another there was a lot of interesting things about the rule. They didn't have a minimum. Most yachting classes have a minimum weight restriction, but not the surf boats. But what the surf boats have is that you are the species of timber that you can use for various parts of them are defined. So if you use the timber that they tell you're allowed to use, they all finish up with approximately the same weight. But of course, like in everything, there's cheats. And there were builders that were building illegal timbers. Their boats were lighter, but they were cheating. So that took a while to get sorted out. But it was just one of the interesting things.
Lovely. We better move on from there, but we've got a fireball here. We'll just skip past these fireballs. Did you have anything you want to particularly say about?
What are we talking about there?
Fireball.
Fireballs? Oh yeah, fireballs are a Jack Holt design. I don't know how long they are. I raced them myself seriously for many years. I don't remember measurements. They must be about 16 feet long, I suppose.
There's one of your surf boats, Bruce.
There's one of my surf boats. Incidentally, where's you haven't put the steamboat up?
No, I'm going to be putting this. We've got I stayed at Bruce's home and I woke up thinking, what's he doing watching television? And he'd gone off somewhere, and I wandered around the house, and I put this thing on TV. The next minute, it's like a professional video of this millionaire launching his boat. And you would have sworn you were at Flemington. They were all so well dressed. And then there's this bloke on television talking. I didn't recognise him because he was rather young, rather good looking, and looked very little like this man here, but it was Bruce, and all of a sudden I took great interest in this video. So I've got it, and as we finish this talk, I'll be putting it on, Bruce.
Oh, right. Sorry.
So we can't do it all here.
Yeah, we just started to talk
we're just moving
fireballs.
on because
so we started to talk about fireballs. They see, all...
Bruce, how important are fireballs? Because we are running out of time. Because I'd like to get a bit of a talk in relation to Pioneer Sound.
All right, okay.
Because we want to sort of...
okay.
We want to be finished here by whatever it is, 7 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay, so is there anything important you'd like to say about fireballs?
Oh, no, they're just another class that we did extremely well in. We built a lot of fireballs, and I had some of my fireballs that had won world championships, and I have some. No, I'm not an obsessive person, but I suppose I've got high standards of the sort of things we do. And we when I say we, I had this fabulous team of 5 guys, and we all loved what I do, and we worked very accurately, and our boats, if they were well sailed, they were quick, yeah. Now, Pioneer Sound.
Okay, we've got Pioneer Sound. Now, Tommy, should we get you up here? Because you can tell the story far better than I. You might come and grab this mic and sit here, and I'll sit over there for a moment. How about that?
Yeah, oh, great.
So where do you want the story to
What a good idea.
If you just
What
keep
a
passing back and
terrific
forth, you've got
idea.
your face fairly close to the mic.
Yeah, good idea, Tom.
Grab my beard.
My pleasure to be up here with you, Bruce. Anyway, just time is important. So we had been reasonably successful in the half-ton class, and we managed to get the first commercially sponsored boat in the yacht racing world up and running, which was to be called Pioneer Sound. So we'd commissioned a design from the hot American designer at the time, and as Bruce has already said, there weren't many builders that could build light cold moulded construction. So the obvious person to do it for us in Melbourne was Bruce Keir. So I went down to his shed one day, and I walked in, and the first thing he said, "We don't build big boats here, get out." And so I sort of spent a bit more time and explained the project, and Bruce ultimately accepted the project, built a truly wonderful, wonderful boat, and whilst it didn't win the 1-ton Worlds, which it was built for, it certainly achieved a lot of the things we set out to do. It was a very innovative boat. They were, at this stage, the ILR rule was going in very rapidly towards very lightweight boats. And, again, Bruce was able to come up with, a wonderful structure for the boat, in 4 very thin skins of King Billy pine. So we got the boat up and running. As I say, it was full of technology of the time, and remember, this is all pre-composites, pre-custom boat, fiberglass boat building. It was, the death knell of it, but at this stage, this was the way they were all built. So we got a boat together. We took it to the 1-ton Cup in New Zealand. We weren't successful. We came 4th, but then we took it to Hawaii, and it was extremely successful. And we won the round of state race in Hawaii and the first Pan Am Clipper Cup. But just getting back to Bruce's involvement in the boat, what can I say? It was probably the best thing I can say. Before the racing starts in the 1-ton Cup, the International Technical Committee all go around and inspect all the boats. And, just to get an idea of where their rules taking boats, and they'd been on a boat before ours called Smackwater Jack, and they were pretty horrified with what was going on with that boat. It was built pretty rough. It had an old tractor engine in it, wires and ropes running all through the boat, so you had to get into the boat through the cockpit floor, and they weren't happy about the way the rule was going, so they came onto our boat next, and they walked in and walked out, and the head of the International Technical Committee said, this is better. And he said, Smackwater Jack, when we designed the rule, this is not what we had in mind. And so they were very relieved to see that, with centreboard cases and all that going up through the boats, we were still able to get a really, really nicely finished and a nice boat to be on and in, and a serviceable sort of boat. So, and that's truly a credit to Bruce, the way he finished the boat off, and he just made it look like a true showpiece.
Do you want to arrow through the next couple of photographs and talk us through it? Yes, the
Of course, Tommy Smackwater Jack went down with all hands.
Yes, it did. In fact, Smackwater Jack sank a year later, going back from Hobart, all hands. So which button do you push?
Just the arrow and the bottom there.
That one?
Yeah, that one. So I'll take the next photograph.
Oh yeah, there it is being launched, or picked up out of the shed or something.
Well, that's coming out of the factory.
Yeah, that's coming out of the shed.
Couple more.
Yeah.
There it is, already on the truck.
Yeah.
That's the Seaway 25, incidentally, there, which you built too. Look, it was a truly...
One of it in sail there, keep going, I think. One of it on the side. Should be there.
Oh, there it is, Pioneer Sound, yep. There it is in the water. Interesting feature of this boat, the mast was deck stepped and had a hydraulic control at the front of the mast. There it is, there's the boat sailing in New Zealand. Truly an exciting boat and a wonderful era in sailing, but it was very short-lived. The boats were pretty flighty, they were pretty fragile, and our friendly rule makers decided that people were going to lose their lives in them. And as Ben just said, the very next year they did lose their lives in them. So,
Tommy, tell us, didn't our friend Chaz from Taz sail that back from?
Yeah, Chaz from Taz, Pirates of the Sea or whatever it was, Pirates and Penzance or whatever it is. He, when we'd finished the round estate race in Hawaii, we were going to take it over to America to do the Southern Ocean racing circuit, and we had to get a delivery skipper to take it. So we found Chaz from Taz in some bar in Honolulu, and he took the project on, and he got the boat there and got it to San Diego. But then someone decided they didn't want this boat sailing in America in their SORC, so they set fire to the boat. And the boat never got to race again after that. So it was a very tragic finish to a wonderful bit of boat building.
Fantastic.
Righto, what do you got to say, my friend?
Oh, look, thanks, Tom. The other thing about the name Pioneer Sound, it really was a pioneer. As Tom mentioned, it was the first fully commercially sponsored boat, and it was put up by the Pioneer Company. But the other interesting thing, that the now very famous sailor John Bertrand, who'd been in America studying, this is long before he won the America's Cup, came back to Australia and saw me and told me about a new system of boat build developed called the West system. Now West, W-E-S-T, stands for Wood Epoxy Saturation Technique. And without going into the details of why it's good, but probably, and so then I approached Tom and his committee and told them about this new system that sounded very interesting to me. And he said, and I suggested we build it with it, and he agreed. So not only was Pioneer Sound the first commercially sponsored boat in Australia, it was the first West system boat in Sala, which has become a very, very standard of timber boat building. Because if it ain't timber, I'm not interested.
I'll just make one more comment on the significance of the Pioneer sponsorship. The boat was going to be called Pioneer Sound, but there were rules, Rule 26 in the sailing rules at the time, that prohibited any form of commercialisation of this crusty old sport of ours. So we ended up not being able to race the boat under its name, so we raced it under its sail number B195. But then it triggered a whole lot of other challenges to that rule, and within 12 months, Rule 26 was struck out of the rule book and the sport was opened up to commercial sponsorship on boats. So it didn't take long, but someone had to start it, so this boat did. Righto.
And one other silly little comment, just to give you this boat was so incredibly light that when we rolled it off its mould, I realised it's 37 feet long, and I don't know, how wide are they, 9 feet or something?
Oh no, 12 feet.
12 feet wide. 2 of us could lift it. That's how light she was built.
It was a beauty. All right, you're done with me there. Good on you, champion. Good on you, champion.
Thank you, Tommy.
Yeah.
Right.
So what's next on the list?
Okay, well, we'll move on to Charleston.
Yeah,
So-
okay, can I mention
So obviously
Carlton?
he didn't want to build big boats, but he's building another one. Have a look at this.
Yeah.
That's the Charleston.
Now, Charleston was a Ron Holland design, also a one-tonner, so 37 feet long. Built super strong, still very light, but built super strong with an incredible aluminium structure inside of it, which linked the keel to the backstay, to the shrouds, to the forestay. So really the hull just went for the ride. It just sort of, and the keel, and it was a fabulous boat. I'm very happy that it was a really good sound boat because I did the delivery trip with it down. It was built for a Tasmanian client. I did the delivery trip down to Hobart with it. But I'm incredibly sad to say that in coming up to do the 79 Sydney Hobart yacht race, it still hasn't arrived. She was lost with all hands, with 5 people, 3 expecting daddies, and something happened to it on the way. Nobody really knows what happened. We rather suspect that it was a very, very bad night that we hear in retrospect. The common thought is that it probably hit a container just slightly, floating under the top of the water. So that's that's one of the saddest moments of my life. That it's awful to think that you've built something that's killed somebody, but that's a fact of life.
Yeah, Bruce. Well, and basically that might have been the last boat built there, was it? As such, because we're saying here that you closed the business at Seaford in November 1, 1979.
To finish up, we had a few dinghies to build to finish up the year, but we'd made the decision to close the business down for other reasons and come up here to live. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was Victoria's loss and rather Northern New South Wales gain, but we could claim him, can't we? So there's Charleston still going in the water by the looks. That's her under Spinnaker. Here we are. So tell us all about Accolade, Bruce.
Well, Accolade.
Yes, she's a Clem Masters. Well done.
Oh yeah. She's a 54-foot Clem Masters designed ocean sailor, I suppose you call him, a big monster. I think only one other one had ever been built. So it was built in fiberglass, and a mould was made, and then my client that wanted Accolade loved the boat and hired or borrowed the mould and got a shell taken off it. And then the Kiwi, Russell Smith and I worked on it for 3 years to parts of the North make it look like a timber boat. But it was an interesting project. I was fortunate to be invited on its maiden voyage, and I'm not sure where it is now. The then owner has been dead for many years, but it was just there. That's a good shot of it. Just a big monster with a big. I can't even think of it. I don't know much about engines. I can't think of the engine that was it.
It had a Gardner, Bruce.
A Gardner, yeah. A 6-cylinder one, I think, yeah. But she was a beaut boat, a good boat to be on, very comfortable, good. And that's a little beauty.
That's Dorothy?
That's Dorothy, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, who did you build Dorothy for?
That's for Rickler Plastria, a very, very dear friend of mine, Rickler Plastria, who is a wonderful, wonderful sailor. And when we were youngsters, we used to race moths against one another. And he always used to say to me, "Oh, one day, Stumpy, you're going to have to build me a boat." And then we finished our moss sailing and our lives went in different directions, and I accidentally bumped into him one night up here. We only hadn't been here for long, and our kids had gone away to a weekend camp, and we decided to have a weekend down at Coffs Harbour, and we went into a Chinese restaurant, and Rico was there he was up doing a house for Australia's very famous author, Peter Keir, and we sat down and had dinner together, and my wife reminded him that I was still interested in building a boat for him, and so to cut a long story short, he designed it, and he came up at home, and the two of us worked together and built it. It was just a friendship job, and when it was all he'd made a big half model of it when he designed it, and so when it was all over, he took the boat and I kept the half model, and it's still, that's 40 years ago, and it's still in butte condition, and he uses it regularly. Yeah.
Now, he did ask Bruce, he said, look, how long would it took 6 weeks to build the boat. And he said, now, if I hadn't been here helping you, how long would it have taken? And Bruce said, 4.
Well, that's not quite accurate, but it's sort of accurate, yeah.
Anyway, there it is sailing.
Yeah.
That's on Pittwater.
It's 19 feet long, and actually Tom was mentioning it when we were yarning before. He made the comment about it, but it's a butte boat, and it's only a little boat. But anyway, and he changed the name. He called it Dorothy. That's his mother.
It's worth making the point that Rick Lafastia is one of Australia's greatest architects.
Yep. What was that?
The Opera House with units, and he's honoured throughout Australian architecture in some of these houses. The one he lives in on Pittwater is it's one of Australia's greatest houses.
I didn't hear any of that.
No, he's just saying that he's a renowned architect, and he's worked on the Opera House. Yes.
The Opera House for Woodson.
Yeah.
And he's highly decorated Australian architect.
Highly decorated Australian architect.
Oh yes, he couple of years, more than a couple of years ago, he won a worldwide award. Yeah. It's only issued once every 2 years for one person for design work with timber, and Rico has that to his credit amongst many other things. And we just happen to be very, very close friends, yeah.
All right, now we'll move on to Alexandra. The steamboat.
Oh, the steamboat, yeah, where the hell's she?
Hey?
We haven't
We've
got...
got, he's lofting it here?
Yeah, that's lofting. For those that don't know what I'm talking about, the absolute basis of all boat building is the accuracy of the lines to which you build it, and 1 in 8 scales or scales can't be super accurate. The only super accurate way is to draw things up full size, and we call that lofting. So with big, long, very straight battens, we can plot all the lines on the boat and just check them for curves. And you'll find just an 1/8 of an inch bump here and a 3/16 of an inch hollow there. You find all those corrections when you do your full-size loftings, and it's from there that you make all your moulds and frames and patterns and God knows what. So that's this boat. We saw a flash of this boat then, did we? Yeah.
That's the steamboat, yeah.
Which is there it is. Which is a replica of of a 100-year-old steam launch. It's got a steam engine in it that came brand new out of its box we tracked down from somewhere, made in 1904, and it was brand new when we put it in this boat. It had never been used. Nobody really knows where it comes from, but there was a specialist steam engineer organised to do the steam engine installation. But that was a beaut project. That was one of the, from a craftsman's point of view, that was a decent sized boat. She was 34 feet long. And in many ways I often think that's probably the best work I've ever done. Now there she is on the trailer.
Now this is built in Bruce's workshop. Upper Crystal Creek, or I think that's where you...
That's correct, Upper Crystal Creek.
Now it's about as far as you... Well, it is as far as you can go. The road doesn't go any further. And it's the most amazing spot, and as you can see, it's like rainforest. And Bruce has always said, if you pee off Springbrook, you'll wet my roof. That's how far he is up in the hinterland. Righto, Bruce.
That's all I can say about...
She's just being launched there, but we do have this on video, so if I set that up later, please feel free while you're having a hamburger or somebody to come and have a quick look at it. That's launch day, and as I said, in this video you'll see they are, you'd think it was Flemington, and not a dirty old launch party. Now Bruce tells me when he took off, he almost creamed the boat. These people pushing off with boat hooks and things, was that it there, Bruce, where you nearly wiped out the boat?
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Anyway, we'll forget that. But
yeah, that doesn't tell you much.
Doesn't tell you much, no. But the video's good. Look, there's that very young and good-looking Bruce Keir. Yeah. That's the bloke I saw in the video. I thought, what the hell? Who's that?
Yeah,
there you are.
Yeah.
All right. Now listen, there's we've just got a few shots of Bruce's boat, the Hen. And while I'm shooting through these, please tell us how you got the Hen. And
the Hen, righto, yeah. That brings a lovely smile on my face. One of my very dear friends is also one of the ex-Moss sailors. It's funny how when you're young and some of the friendships you've formed then just stayed forever. And this friend, who was reasonably well known in the sailing world, Henry Arthur, his name was, and he rang me one day, it's 25 years ago now, it seems like yesterday, and said, hey Stump, you've got to come down and see me. And I said, yeah, okay, but what is, any urgency? He said, oh yeah, he says, and I said, why? He said, oh, I'm going to be dead. And he was serious. He, poor bugger had cancer that you get from, never get my tongue around it, you can get from asbestos. He'd been a builder and...
Mesothelioma.
Yeah. And he lived on Pittwater. And so I went down to see him and sat by his bedside and yarned, and he sort of came good a bit. And over the next year or so, I went down 3 or 4 times. I'd often get a phone call to say, oh, it's happening soon, you better come down. I can laugh now. I mean, it's not funny, but it's beautiful in many ways. Now, just outside his house, where he lived in Lovett's Bay in Pittwater, which is no road connection, the only access is by water. Just outside his house, he had a wrecked old boat hanging on a pick that he and his sons had salvaged somewhere in the water, in Pittwater. They'd seen it through the clear water and pulled it up. And he was going to restore it himself. And he said, I want you to have it. And I wasn't sure whether I wanted it or not, and yet I was getting close to the end of my sailing career, and I thought, maybe I was thinking of designing a power boat for myself of some description. So I borrowed a trailer and went down and picked it up, and it really was a wreck. I don't know whether I got any photos of it.
Yeah, we got photos of it, but it's looking too good here. But there it is.
There she is. And anyway, I turned it into a nice boat, and I have a belief that boats should have a female name, and his name was Henry, and we always called him Hen, and it seems to me that Hen's female, so I called the boat Hen. And I've had the Hen for 20 plus years now, used it an awful lot, cruised it in a lot, and I've just recently sold it because I'm just not physically up to handling boats anymore. But so that's the Hen story. Maybe some of you have seen the Hen, maybe not.
Well, if anyone had been to a Bribie regatta or a Tweed Heads regatta, the Hen was there.
Yeah.
So we might just... Now, this is an aerial view of... Is that Mount Warning in the background there, Bruce? Is that Mount Warning? No.
Yes.
That is Mount Warning. Well, this is an aerial view of Bruce's property, which is quite fantastic. That's the house. That's his workshop down the hill. Now, to this day, that's a bit of a hill. Bruce walks in the morning down to that workshop and works, comes up for lunch and goes back in the afternoon. And at 80 hours, some days he has a rest in the afternoons, but an extraordinary effort. And
that's
Patrina
where I need the walking stick.
Patrina and I spent a weekend there taking the photographs of his photographs for this presentation here tonight, and just had a wonderful weekend. The drive up there is extraordinary. That's his house, and it's a real home. It's just a lovely, lovely home. But Bruce built it all himself, of course. What do we got there?
Tom?
Oh, that's Tommy's...
That Tom...
That's Tom Stevenson's models. Yeah. Fantastic. So, that would be me with my notes. Trying to. Bruce would say, "Well, I'd have to take you back to 1934." I say, "Bruce, it's raining. We've got to get out of here. I want to move forward." Because you do, when it rains a little bit too much, you can't get out. And Patrina and I did have to go to work the next day. There we are in Bruce's workshop, which is quite fantastic. It's just amazing. Full of atmosphere, full of Bruce Keir. Now, just to touch on Bruce's sailing achievements, for those of you, if anyone had read my introduction I sent, Bruce has built over 300 boats in his lifetime, made an extraordinary contribution to class development and competitive sailing and boating in Australia. 5 Australian sailing championships in different classes, 11 state championships, 4 club championships, 1 Interdominion Championships, represented Australia in 6 laser master/grandmaster championships, placing 6th in the world in 1990. Bruce has also competed in 2 Sydney Hobarts and 7 Gladstone races. Congratulations, Bruce, on an extraordinary boating life. Now, Bruce, would anyone have any questions Bruce could answer for you before we close? Anyone have any questions? It's been a pretty comprehensive presentation, you have to say. We might have covered everything.
Can I just ask Bruce, he must have had a wonderful wife to let him play with boats like that.
You must have had a wonderful wife to let you play with boats.
No. Let me say I'm not prepared to answer that question. Well, the marriage didn't last very long.
Yeah, that was a very hurtful question, thank you, Russell. Does anyone have any less painful questions for Bruce? Yes, Brian.
So Bruce, you talked about your great-great-grandfather. Did you get any tools left to you from him?
In relation to your great-great-grandfather, did you get any tools left to you?
No, but I've certainly got a lot of my father's tools.
Because you didn't know your great-grandfather.
I didn't know anything
didn't know his
about it. I
great-grandfather.
just heard it. I think maybe the Maritime Museum in Canberra got in touch with me to realised that the name Keir is a bit unusual, and it must have. I think that's how that came about. But no.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for your attention. We'll turn the lights on and have a hamburger and a beer.
Thank you.